Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. This is the weekly EV broadcast, and I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner, and good morning. Welcome.
The image behind us, we always have interesting AI images. This one I said to Midjourney, I said, give me a futuristic news studio at the North Pole. And this is what it came up with.
That's really interesting if it's there at the North Pole, because I've seen pictures of where the North Pole is supposed to be up and in Alaska, and there are not mountains quite like that, but that is really beautiful. Now, Jesse, if you're able to show the entire picture, I found the most fascinating thing of the picture to me to be part of what's in the very, very front, but right now our table is blocking that.
Ah, okay.
And it's, I don't, if he can pull it up, it's not just floor up here in the front when the stairs come down.
As soon as he gets that, yeah, we'll grab that. In the meantime, Instagram, we know we're still green screen. Switch over to YouTube if you want to see these images we're talking about. We'll also be posting some images today. And as always, we are feverishly working on trying to get our streaming service to fix the Instagram problem. There we go.
Yeah, now you look in the front there, that ramp down, it looks like it's going down into rocks.
Oh, so it is truly outside.
It's truly an outside studio.
Okay. It must have been airlifted in there with one of those large cargo jets or something, right?
That's what I'm thinking. Maybe one of those big Chinook helicopters or something like that.
Looks like we have some people chiming in. YouTube surfer Frank Downey says metaverse. Thank you for joining us, by the way.
Yes, and good morning. And then Bammy Bike Life Yaying on YouTube says, I'm swapping to YouTube so I can see where we're talking about.
Yeah, appreciate that. So one of the things we're going to cover today is we've got 10 surprise items on the Tesla Project Highland that people are excited about, and that no one saw coming, according to this particular article. But as predicted, Tesla launched the refreshed Model 3 September 1st. And these are the Project Highland cars that made their public debut at IAA Mobility in Munich, Germany. That would have been a fun place to be this time of year. I think it's Oktoberfest time. We're getting close to it.
Oh, that would have been a great time.
Yeah. So journalists in Europe got to spend some time with this new Model 3. And this is some of their takeaways that we're going to be talking about here. And there are 10 of them that were pretty noteworthy. The first information about this Project Highland Model 3 refresh actually surfaced the end of 2022. And at that time, no one really expected there to be much of a change, just a mild redesign. And it was aimed to bring the Model 3 closer to the Model Y, which has already seen several updates. And these include the mega casting, structural battery packs, improved suspension, and autopilot computer and sensors, and more, as they say. So the revamped Model 3 also would allow Tesla to make more money by cutting costs wherever possible. Now, it's a tough challenge to improve and cut costs. Those are usually mutually exclusive.
Yes.
But as it turns out, once you see us begin to go into some of these takeaways, they were actually able to achieve that. So hats off to Tesla for coming through. They already took features out of the current model, which include ultrasonic sensors. And there were some more cost-cutting measures that would certify that these missing features would not be coming back. So let's go into this here then. It was not a radical design, but there were some certain items that they made changes with. The first one was they now give you a magnetic glove box instead of the latching mechanism type. And my computer froze here. Bear with me.
I think the magnetic glove box is kind of a cool thing. It's you can generate so much magnetic force with electromagnets, and it doesn't take very much electricity to put a magnet together for that. Then your switch, instead of being a mechanical switch, you're simply Yet again, it's a failure point that you'll never have.
Hmm. And the main benefit, apparently, that Tesla felt with this magnetic mechanism is that it's more economical to produce. This saves money again and reduces the cost. At the same time, they thought that it should be or would be more durable and convenient. Now, the second thing is the glove box can still be opened with a voice command or a button on the screen as before. And you can still set a pin to open this compartment. Now, not everybody was convinced that the magnetic system is as good as a conventional latch to lock one's items safely. Although no one tried, some were left with the impression, they say, that you could pry it open using a spoon or a knife because they felt magnets don't seem to be that strong. But again, the advice is keep in mind that a glove box is not a vault, and you should not keep your valuables in the vehicle.
Oh, by all means, it's I can't even begin to describe how many times you've seen in older vehicles the glove boxes, and you're thinking, all I have to do is kind of pull hard on the handle. I'm going to break the lock.
Right, right. And in Hollywood, whenever they open a glove box and it's a criminal, there's a gun in there.
Of course.
Yeah. Looks like we got a bunch of people chiming in now. YouTube, Coolabee says, back ying. Oh, okay. He's talking to one of our viewers.
Yes.
And Surfer Frank Downey says, yeah, that looks like a Black Panther.
Oh, yeah. The mountains do look very much like the mountains in Wakanda.
Mm-hmm. YouTube, Surfer Frank Downey says, 1998, Cerritos College, we had an electric vehicle program. And I saw the Tzero. Well, good for you. There are only 3 of those in existence, and there's actually a 4th one that one of the employees at AC Propulsion has been working on for 20 years now.
Yeah.
And if it ever surfaces and gets completed, then we may have 4 Tzeros on the planet. One of them is one that we have here, went through a fire, but the frame is there. And we've put the batteries back in it, showing where the placement of these 28 lead acid AGM batteries were in the car. Good for about 80 miles, guys. YouTube, Mostafa El Gamal says, for your information, Tesla is heavily discounting existing inventory for the Model Y after they remove the lowest trim. I've seen prices as low as $43,500 from Texas. Seems like end of quarter discounts. Very possible.
Very possible. Tesla has done some things this quarter. While they announced at the investors meeting when they went over their second quarter numbers that they were going to have lower production numbers in third quarter, they also put together some programs that caused a little bit of controversy, and people were saying, it's a sales gimmick, I guess it doesn't matter if it is or not. The discounts and things like allowing people to migrate full self-driving to a new car at no charge. Hey, whatever works is kind of my thought.
Mm-hmm. Surfer Frank Downey says, is AC Propulsion still in business? It is, very much so, actually. They're in San Dimas, California, and they're no longer making cars. The Tzeros was a part of a federal grant that they received in 1997, and it was exhausted. And since then, AC Propulsion Systems has been doing consulting work for other EV manufacturers and has a drivetrain. What we're excited about is any of these manufacturers that will eventually make a plug-and-play ICE conversion to EV drivetrain assembly. We think that's going to be a huge market at some point in time. So the other thing, Jesse, if you can bring up an image, it's called PRND. And one of the things that surprised people about the Highland in Munich was, although the Model S and Model X, although stockless, featured a backup gear shift control PRD buttons in the center console next to the wireless phone charger, people who entered this refreshed Model 3 at the Tesla booth in Munich could not find such a thing. Later, the report showed that the buttons were placed on the ceiling between the sun visors. And the markings overhead are almost invisible, but they're there all right. Now you have to question the judgment in this because it's difficult to find. And then if you look at that picture, you can kind of make out the outline of the PRND pattern. But it was confirmed that the manual that the buttons are only visible when you touch them, and once a button is pressed, then an amber light illuminates the selection. They can also be activated automatically when the car's computer detects a malfunction with the center display or transport or valet mode. Another method to activate the gear shift is by pressing both scroll buttons on the steering wheel. So we're not sure that this was a improvement from what was there before, but it looks like that they're not far enough into the design here yet where they could probably make some adjustments.
Yeah, to me, it's an interesting one. It would take some getting used to. It's all part of the stockless steering wheel, that term, which you don't even think about it. Every car you've probably ever been in not only has your steering wheel, not only has a steering column, but it has a turn signal and it has a cruise control. And in many cars, if you have the automatic car, you have the gear shift on the stalk, and those are on that drive shaft, and those are what they're calling stalks. And this new Model 3 doesn't have any of that.
Right. On the steering column,
Yeah, on the steering column. So I don't know. That'd take me some getting used to. Although when I think about it, how often am I touching that stalk to go forward or in reverse? When I'm pulling into or out of a parking lot, when I'm parking the car.
And of course, the manufacturers have been frustrating, car owners by moving the stalks on opposite sides.
Oh yeah.
Indiscriminately. There's a story about one of the lucid failure modes was a common one, enough to where it was talked about quite a bit in the service circles. That is that a customer would be driving down the road, and suddenly the car would go into neutral and it would stop, propelling. And it turns out that those were usually on rainy days, and what people thought they were pushing was the windshield wipers. Instead, it was the PRND stalk, But the manufacturers have been moving away from stalks, and of course, as this continues, eventually there will be no more wheels in cars, and once we have full self-driving, and the human population will no longer know how to drive.
Oh my gosh.
It'll be all voice.
Oh man. But you're right. It's coming.
So the other thing that they improved on this Highland version was a manual rear door release. And, Tesla uses electrically operated door releases on its vehicles because it needs to automate the function. So when you press the door release button, the computer triggers the window to lower just a bit before unlatching the door and then allowing it to open. But still, the electrical system can no longer open the door if the 12-volt system goes down for, in a crash or in a fire. And this is where a mechanical release comes in handy. The article says Tesla hates these systems, especially in the rear doors. Now, I don't know why they hate them. It seems like a safety, improvement. But the current Model 3 does not come with a manual release on the rear doors, or it has it hidden beneath the door panel. This makes it impossible to use in emergencies, or difficult. Let's take the word impossible out of there, if there is a hidden one beneath the door panel. Thankfully, the refreshed Model 3 comes with properly designed manual release on the rear doors, which can be used in emergencies.
I like that particular design improvement. Obviously, it's difficult enough to get to that you're not going to do it by accident. It's easy enough to get to that you can get to it in an emergency. Many people don't know about the manual door releases that exist right now on Model S's. I remember hearing a story this summer of a man in Phoenix lost power in his car, and he called emergency. He called 911. He said, "I'm trapped. My car has trapped me, and I can't get out."
Yeah.
And what it was is that He was in his Model S. It had lost power due to a malfunction, and he didn't know how to get to his manual door release, and so he effectively felt trapped.
Sure, sure. This is an interesting story. We bought a 2017 P90D Ludicrous from an auction site in New Orleans in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at these Copart IA Mannheim pictures, you can kind of see what's going on with the car. This one had us puzzled because it was a flood damage car, but yet it looked like it had some body damage. The rear hatch glass was broken, but not penetrated. The rear passenger door winglet, the little triangular portion, was broken out as well. And so we assumed that maybe a tree fell on it and there would be some body damage. So we got the car. We were looking at the body, and the body was fine. There were 2 pieces of glass that were broken. Not even in the same plane. If something fell on the rear hatch and broke, and the rear window was on the same plane, you would understand.
Sure.
Well, anyway, what typically happens is when we buy these flood damaged cars, we eventually hack into the computer and we get some owner information because the auction houses don't give you that.
Right.
So I spoke to the previous owner and he said, I'm a manufacturer's rep. My car was in the garage. We were starting to get flood water coming down the street, and my garage had 18 inches of water in it. And my car had shut down. I couldn't get it out of the garage. So I called the insurance company, and they said, well, the only way you can get in the car is by breaking glass. And he had his manufacturer's rep kit in there that he needed the next day to make a customer call, right? Well, he loved the car so much, it wasn't him that was going to take a hammer and break some glass. So he called his drunk neighbor next door, who by this time of day usually was 7 sheets under the wind. And he said, look, can you get in my car? I can't break the windows on this. So anyway, his neighbor tried, and he didn't realize that the back hatch is not the type of safety glass that crumbles when you hit it. There's actually a plastic membrane that runs through it. So he wasn't able to penetrate there. So then he decided, well, I'm going to break into the rear door, since that little winglet is much smaller than the regular windows on the sides, on the doors. Well, he broke that out, reached inside, and didn't realize that when the car's dead, there's no mechanical handle for him to pull on the rear door. So that's why this car had all that glass damage. But it proves the point. Yeah, if you're, there is no manual release on some of the Teslas.
Yeah, especially on the rear doors. So it's good to see that safety feature has been added.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that.
YouTube, Highlander, welcome back. Highlander, he says, where's George and Crunch? It's lunchtime. Yeah, I haven't heard from those guys yet.
Good question.
But I'm sure they'll be around. And then Roger Starkey, one of our regulars, is also visiting from YouTube. He says, regarding price, Tesla is simply doing what they said they would do in Master Plan 1 and 2 and 3, which is reducing prices.
And Roger's exactly right on that. I mean, Elon continues to talk about, on a very consistent basis, the topic of price, and say, I'm not out to compete with Mercedes and with the high-end luxury car makers. I'm out to compete with Ford. That's he's been, and he's been very consistent saying that, and he has said that over many years.
And of course, the underlying reason for all of this is EV adoption and the transition to sustainable energy.
Yes, definitely.
YouTube, Out of Spec Mom, welcome. Looks like a new person from YouTube. As she's saying, as a Tesla Model 3 owner, I am not that impressed with the Highland refresh other than the new front bumper and the rear treatment. Yeah, you're right. I like that front bumper. That refresh looks good.
Yeah.
They need a larger battery and new, more efficient motors for range, I'm assuming.
Yes. And I know we'll get to some of the front and back bumper. Overall, I've been through all 10 items, and I know we're going to go through the rest of these in more detail. Most of them I looked at, I'm like, Some of them pretty cool. Some of them I don't care about at all. Like the PRND on the ceiling. I'm not sure I like that at all.
Yep. But the next one you guys are going to like. Let me clear another few questions, and we'll get right to it. Joey's cleaning lady is joining us from YouTube. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Question is, what is Pete's daily driver? A Roadster question mark? You know, somewhere here at Gruber Motor Company, I have a P90D Ludicrous
Yes.
that I personally repaired in 2017. I remember laying on the floor of that car and resoldering two 42-pin connectors that were corroded badly, and basically tracing wires, you know, and they weren't just single color wires in 42. What you end up with is you have 7 basic colors, and then you have stripes on the rest. And if they're corroded and dirty, you really have to look hard.
Yeah.
Well, I laid there for 2 weekends resoldering these wires, getting rid of the connectors completely, only to realize that when I got all done with this, Tesla was not following the colors on the wires. They had actually crossed some of those colors, so it didn't work. Fortunately, I saved the old corroded connectors and was able to go into the little stubs of remaining insulation on what I had cut off, and I was able to trace and develop a translation table to get that car working. But the reason I'm telling you all this is I love that car. I drove it every day. It was my daily driver, and I would do ludicrous launches when visitors came.
Sure.
Take them on the 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds, I think that car was. But eventually it went into the loaner program, and one day the battery quit. Since then, I drive a Tesla Roadster every day. And because we have so many Tesla Roadsters coming through here for repair, I'm the only one I trust to test drive the cars, and I live about 7 miles away. So I drive one home every night, and I have a different one every 3 days or so. We go through the charge-discharge cycles, make lots of notes about performance. And what's cool about it is I've been traveling this route for 40 years, and I know every pothole, nook, cranny, crack, transition from asphalt to concrete. So I can tell how the car's suspension behaves. And anyway, so I have a different Roadster. This morning I had a Fusion Red. Yesterday I had a gray wrapped Roadster, and before then I had a Thunder Gray over the weekend. So that's what I drive every day.
I do hope that someday your P90D Ludicrous comes back to you. I still remember that. You had it. It went into the shop for battery repair. And I think it was 4 weeks later or 5 weeks later, it was suddenly missing 2 door handles.
Yeah, yeah, and then the trunk latch,
and then the trunk latch, and then the trunk, the gas struts
right
on the trunk, and and as time goes on, now you go look out and you're like, man, what's wrong with that car? It looks like it's missing a window. It doesn't have any door handles. The trunk doesn't latch.
But let's be real clear here. We do not do anything like this to customer cars. Only the CEO's car gets this kind of treatment and has to wait for 1.5 years to get repaired. No, the good news is we have a lot of work, and we take good care of our customers. And, if necessary, my car becomes a donor car when we've got a customer.
I think that would be true for any of the managers that have cars if it ever became necessary. One of these days, I'm sure you'll get your car back, though.
I'm looking forward to it. Out of Spec Mom also says the turn signal stalk is something that should have remained. Yeah, we're used to it. From our generation, I'm always looking for stalks when I'm trying to make a turn. I'm not sure how I would do that with buttons. The other thing that I find difficult is when I drive, I keep my eyes on the road. And it's nice to have, muscle memory as to where these various things are. Yeah. I can't do that with a screen. And I'm always concerned that if I look down at that screen while I'm driving in traffic, there's a safety issue there. Now, I know that the next generation here thinks that they can text and drive and look at their cell phones and watch movies or whatever it is. But following some of those people, I don't think that that's true.
We won't be driving for much longer.
We won't. All right, there goes Jesse. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is where even if you have your autopilot on, it's not full self-driving, but you still have the ability to look down for 3 seconds and trust that autopilot will take care of you if something happens in that 3 seconds that you're distracted.
Right.
I tend to be like you, though. If I'm driving, I like to look forward and drive.
Yeah. All right. Out of spec mom says FSD is many, many years away. I'm going to give you a suggestion here. We have a AI podcast that we do every Sunday. And this last Sunday, Jesse and I spent a lot of time on the major breakthrough that Tesla just made with full self-driving by shifting from rule-based algorithms and hundreds of thousands of lines of code, the type of code that says, stay within your lane. If you see this shape sign, this color, do this, do this, do this. What they did was they went to an imitation process, and Tesla, if you're aware, has been collecting videos with their vehicles now for years, many years, and they have the largest collection of driving videos of anybody on the planet. They fed that information into AI. They critiqued the information that was inserted by having people review or separate the bad drivers from the good drivers, and only the good drivers were allowed to go into this AI pool. And suddenly, full self-driving began to make sense. It's kind of the way that humans learn. It's like a neural network,
Right.
many layers. So I would suggest taking a look at that AI podcast that we did Sunday. It's on our YouTube channel under Gruber Motors, and it may be enlightening.
Roger Starkey also has his opinion on full self-driving. He says full self-driving will be ready, quote unquote, in months. It will be regulated.
Another quote, yes.
When the regulators say so.
And you know what? This article that we found that was actually part of the basis for this AI podcast was it looks like full self-driving, at least from Tesla's viewpoint, is almost there, very close, inches away. But it's the regulators now that are going to decide whether that's truly the case. And I'll give you a funny story on this. Part of the problem is that when they imitate human drivers, the traffic rules are not always precisely followed. The majority of these videos were, when you get to a stop sign, you kind of roll through it. Nobody comes to a complete stop. Rule-based, FSD is a complete stop every single time.
Right.
So the question now is going to be, will the laws get relaxed to the point where rolling slowly through a stop sign is acceptable?
That's a great question, because if it's not, who gets the ticket?
That's another good one, yeah. It wasn't me, officer. My hands are off the... In fact, I was in the back seat watching the screen back there, I don't think that's going to fly, at least not initially. Joey's cleaning lady says Tesla owners don't signal anyway, so it's not a big loss.
Yeah, my wife would agree with that.
Yeah.
She says I never signal.
I have a thought on that.
Yeah.
I'll share that. Having driven race cars, if you're on a racetrack and every second, microsecond counts, you don't have time to do this sort of thing and, flip all kinds of dials. You're aware of your surroundings. If you're a race car driver, you've got some mirrors, and and that's part of the gift. You know exactly what timing is and all that, and signals are not necessary. When you're on a track, everybody knows what you're trying to do. You're trying to get in the left lane and pass everybody, right?
Yeah.
All right. So that tends to be the way that I drive on the roads, but I'm fully aware of everybody around me. And when I use signals is when somebody behind me or in front of me needs that information in order to make an informed decision.
There you go. That's exactly where I'm at. There are so many times I'm going to pull up to an intersection and I need to turn left.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? There's nobody else at the intersection.
Right.
Why am I going to signal to turn left?
What's the point? Yeah.
What's the point?
Yeah. Now, you could go a step further and say, now there's a red light. There's no one in the intersection. What's the point in stopping? Why not just go through it? But we can't go that far.
Yeah, and I'm not going to go that far. I'm not,
Right.
and I actually tend to be the guy that gets all the way down to like 2 miles an hour at the stop signs too. Every once in a while, I'll get to,
The California stop.
I do the California stop sign. A funny story before we go on. My wife is complaining to me about not signaling, and I'm like, fine, I'll signal whatever you need. So I signal to turn down the street, signal to turn in the neighborhood. There's nobody on the street, ahead of us, behind us, beside us, but I still signal to turn into the driveway.
Hmm.
Kids love that. They
They
thought
do.
that was the funniest thing.
but it made Connie happy.
It made Connie happy, and it kind of proved a point.
Right.
I do the same thing, but it's for cops.
Well, yeah.
Just in
th-
case
yeah.
somebody's feeling
Okay.
a little frisky one day and sees I didn't use a turn signal on a local road at 10 at night when there's nobody around, wants
Yeah.
to pull me over.
Or they haven't made their ticket quota that day. Yeah. They're just looking for prey.
I do,
Yeah.
I do have a story about that though.
Sure, go, Cass.
My birth mom was driving me and my sister to daycare, and she didn't use her turn signal. And the intersection was clear. There was nobody there. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning, and there was a cop. And so the cop pulled her over because she didn't use her turn signal, even though the intersection was clear and we were running late.
Right. Right. Well, he probably had that quota to make. Yeah. All right. YouTube. George is with us. Good morning, guys and gal. All right. Thanks for joining
Good
us.
morning.
Roger Starkey is saying you're thinking of an Audi. Oh, you're thinking of Audi owners indicating. With the signals,
with
you
the
mean?
turn
Yeah,
signals
he's
and
talking
stuff.
to Joey's cleaning lady.
Okay. All right. There we go. Model 3 and Y owners signal probably 30% of the time. Now, that's interesting. There's a good study to do. Is it true that Tesla owners use their signals less than the other ICE owners?
Well, we know who'd be at the bottom of the charts.
Yeah.
BMW drivers.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. I'm below that 30%. I'll raise my hand. Roger Starkey says owner bought a 100K car or so and didn't read the manual.
Right. Right. Well, it's have you ever gone to IKEA? I usually put the stuff together first and then find out the stuff that I missed later. But it's
when you put this together stuff and you have this pile of bolts and nuts and stuff. And you're like, okay,
leftovers. Yeah.
I obviously left something out.
YouTube, Mostava El Gamal says, out of spec, he's talking to out of spec mom, are you using the FSD beta 11.4 or later? Because things started to shape up. Okay.
That's good.
Good point. My P90D Ludicrous had a version of self-driving, and when I took people for a drive, I would take my hands off the wheel, off the pedals, and say, look, this car can actually track all that. But as soon as we got close to a red light or a stop sign, I said, this car will kill you. It can't see that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Out of spec mom has a reply to that as well, where she says, I've been beta for 2 years. There's a long way to go, particularly in city environments or roundabouts.
Really?
Real
Okay.
quick,
Yeah.
just so out of spec mom and all the other people know, the 11 beta and all the betas before it are not neural network. So we don't even know what the actual full self-driving is like. The only person that knows is Elon and then the actual internal test team.
Yeah.
So all the stuff that's been beta tested has really just been collecting data. The neural network is going to completely reshape FSD.
So Jesse, you're saying that beta 12 or version 12 is based on a neural network in the Dojo computer?
Yes.
Oh,
That's the one that Elon was showing off when he did his 45-minute drive that no one had ever seen before.
Okay, and being the tech and IT guy from my past, that neural network is a game changer.
Yeah, it is.
That is absolutely a game changer.
And he had 3 passengers in the back from the full self-driving team. This was in Palo Alto. And for 45 minutes, no hands on the wheel, no pedal control. And the only thing that was a downside was, and it was minor, the full self-driving at times had a difficult time at a stop sign making a deferential judgment as to who should go next. And of course, that's a very human trait, and that's probably why, because I find a lot of humans have a difficult time. You get to a 4-way stop sign, and invariably, you have to be bold and take the initiative. In fact, last night, on my way home, that very thing. And I usually give them a couple seconds. You were here first. It is your turn. Take it. And if not, I'm going to be impatient. Go.
Well, or the 4-way stop a couple days ago, going to a 4-way stop. One of the routes I take home has one, and I get up there, and there are cars at all 3 other sides, and I'm not the first one there. I'm the one that just got there. But the guy to my left, it's his turn to go, so he's turning left. Well, it would be irresponsible of me, in my opinion, if I don't take advantage of being able to go straight at the same time that he's turning left, because all three other areas of the intersection have stopped for him to go.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's part of the traffic flow, but you have to kind of understand that.
Yeah. So that's where this human imitation may have some limitations, but I'm sure they'll solve that because they've solved the other 99%.
Oh, I'm sure
of
they
full
will.
self-driving.
Highlander had a question for us earlier, and I know, it's a little off topic from what we've been talking about, but he wanted to know more about the 3 Roadsters.
3 Roadsters. Okay. Good time to insert that. For those of you interested, we are releasing some videos now.
Mm-hmm.
We have one on YouTube, guys. Is it live yet? The intro video for the 3 Roadsters?
No, we were just setting that up earlier today.
Okay. If you're on Facebook, there's a site called Tesla Roadster Owners Group, and it's confined typically to Roadster owners, but I'm sure that you can access it because it's an open site. We began to post pictures there. Some of the takeaways on that are, we were curious whether these cars, and we've only taken the first one out so far, by the way, out of the sea container, whether the service plug was pulled on the main battery pack. And the reason that was pivotal is no one knows if it was pulled and there was no drain on the batteries for 13 years, whether there would be any life left in the batteries. So far, empirical evidence indicates that on a later model Tesla, you can go about 2 to 3 years and still have a good battery. With the Roadster, we've seen over a year with that service plug pulled, but no one's gone 13 years. Well, sadly, the first one we pulled out, the service plug was inserted, and what that means is the battery was supporting 12-volt systems, there were pumps that were running, and it would have killed that battery within the first 4 to 6 months sitting in that sea container. The second thing that was noteworthy was there was rodent damage. And it's not uncommon that critters like that, unless you have a feral cat around your neighborhood that takes care of the rodents, or maybe even a house cat if you're not feeding it well, it'll take care of that problem. Rodents tend to eat the insulation on wires, and they say some of it is a soy-based insulation. And in this case, they not only ate insulation, but they actually got down into the copper wires. So we have some frayed wires on the door sections where the connection goes from the door to the chassis. So there's some fixing we'll have to do there. Then we also saw a rubber hose underneath the hood that had been chewed into. And yesterday, when we fired up the car with 12-volt support and downloaded firmware and got the mileage, and I'll talk about that in a second, we noticed some coolant was leaking underneath the car. So it looks like the rodents got into that plumbing as well. There are rubber hoses underneath. And we think it's rodents because we've been working on Tesla Roadster since 2013. And honestly, the rubber hoses in the cooling sections, and there are lots of them on the ESS pack. There are 4 times 11 hoses because each sheet has 4 hoses on it. We've never seen one that has been compromised or has leaked. So that was another thing. We've got some rodent damage. Then the mileage. Initially, these were described as 0-mile Roadsters, and then later on, talking to Tesla, they said, well, none of the brand new Tesla Roadsters, when they were delivered to customers, were exactly 0 miles because some test driving took place.
Right.
So initially, the expectation was it would be about 30 miles. Well, the first one we fired up was 109 miles, 109.3 miles. And the way we found that was there is no mechanical odometer in these cars. It's all in firmware. But we're able to get into the firmware with a firmware laptop. And that's how we got the 109 miles. We talked to someone at Tesla yesterday during the podcast, actually, Michael, who was there during the early days. He was like one of the first 200 employees. And he said the reason for that is they went from 30 miles test drive to 100 miles because of some infant mortality issues with the hardware and the firmware.
Yeah, they had found that 30 miles just wasn't quite a robust enough test drive And with the VIN numbers on these 3 cars being as close as they are, we're thinking now that maybe all 3 of them are going to be somewhere around 100 miles when we get
Right.
them fired up.
So that explains why it's 100 miles. It still indicates that these were never put in ownership or driven on the road by an owner. So that was another takeaway. The third thing that we found, which was a surprise, is there was PPF on the Radiant Red Roadster. We don't think that there is any on the very orange, but we advise customers all the time, especially with first generation PPF, take that stuff off after 8 years. It's going to eventually harden, cloud, and in worst case scenarios is the adhesive on the PPF will crystallize and bond with the clear coat underneath. And now you have to repaint your car in order to get off the cloudy, oftentimes cracked PPF. It turns out that these cars were never exposed to ultraviolet or sunlight. They were in sea containers, pitch dark, for 13 years. So this particular PPF, although cracked and clouded, looks like we may be able to take it off without any paint damage.
That will be nice if we're able to do that. And I wouldn't be surprised because it is the UV radiation that will cause that adhesive to crystallize and adhere to the clear coat.
Mm-hmm. So those are some of the takeaways. The tires, of course, were date-coded 2010, so that again confirms these were not on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're doing today is we're putting it up on a lift, and we're going to carefully document and analyze the bottom of the car, the tub, the suspension components, the control arms, and take a look to see what we find there. And of course, look for rodent damage again because of the the coolant leak.
Well, and we had heard from the owners of the car that there were some rat issues at the location where these cars had been stored in China. Now, I got a question on this this Roadster after the podcast yesterday afternoon when we're talking about it and talking about the things that are going on. I just lost my train of thought.
Well, it's okay. Then I'll take over for you. So where we're at currently is the 3 sea containers are there. We'll be taking out the very orange, what's today, Thursday, maybe as soon as tomorrow, but most likely Monday. The goal here is to carefully document every step of the way because, again, these are historic cars. I'm not sure that anyone has ever this carefully documented a brand new Roadster the way it was delivered. We have things that are in the trunk, for example, that are in box or in cardboard boxes still sealed. So we are now becoming aware exactly what these cars look like. One other minor inconvenience is there are no keys yet for the car and may never be. The keys were available at one point in time, but the main manager that was handling these particular or this section of sea containers died about 3 years ago, and they've rummaged through his desk, and no one can find the keys for these cars. So our next step is to get a locksmith, replicate the keys, and then we should be able to get in and out easier. Currently, we're doing it manually.
I recall that question, and it has to do with the cars being stored in those sea containers in a high humidity environment. Do you think there's any chance you're going to see rust on the undercarriage of any kind?
You know, we thought about that as well. Of course, being a coastal area, there's salt ions that are migrating inland. The winds are right and all that. And with humidity, they bind with the moisture in the air and they can get deposited. The only thing we saw that indicates that type of corrosion was some bolts on the power electronic module, the security bolts, the Torx bolts. And there were some that looked flash rusted. However, we looked at the control arms underneath and we didn't see the flash rust there. We saw flash rust on the brake rotors, which is normal because that's raw steel.
Right.
But it wasn't heavy type of rust. It's what you'd normally see in a car that hasn't been driven for a while.
Okay.
But yeah, this has been quite a experiment and very educational. We will be releasing a lot of this through our YouTube channel, and it'll be in the form of short form videos, TikTok, our YouTube shorts, and then the long videos. And those of you that are on Facebook, check out that Facebook site called Tessa Roadster Owners Group. There will be a lot of pictures posted there as well. if there are any final questions about those cars, please feel free to put them on the screen there.
Thank you, Pete. Niles from the Bion Danish Genome Institute is with us today. And he says OOSM, not sure what that stands for right offhand.
Out of spec, Mom.
Okay, thank you. Agree times 3. Robotaxis may even create more traffic than what it replaces, as Uber does in San Francisco, for example.
True, until we go into the other dimension, which is flying cars.
Yeah. I would think that some sort of self-driving, some sort of automotive automation is going to be a prerequisite for flying cars.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully by that time, we will have traffic intersections where their intelligence is to the point where they're looking for traffic. How often do you sit at a light, the full cycle, with no cars going the opposite or, crisscrossing? Yeah. And, if the light was smart, it would realize, well, it's time for me to speed up that cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
Until enough cars show up.
Exactly. And, there are enough stupid people driving in 2 dimensions right now. I can't imagine what it would be like to have them driving in 3.
Well, that's some heavy language for you, Mark, but yeah, congratulations. I feel the same way. I call them crappy drivers, the ones that, as I've said many times, my wife and I, we, even though that light is turned green, we look both ways before we pull out.
Oh, yeah.
You can get killed not doing that.
Oh, yeah. Roger Starkey has also added a comment on YouTube. It says, Tesla will maintain sufficient margin to fulfill the mission and adjust prices down if able.
Interesting company there, that Tesla. Yes, I agree.
Yes.
YouTube PYGKLB says, I've heard more complaints from eastern U.S. Perhaps the old roads are more challenging. Oh, without a doubt.
Oh,
One
yeah.
of the biggest changes that I saw when I moved out here from upper New York State to Phoenix, Arizona, was the quality of the roads. And it's fundamentally because in the Four Seasons climate, even a little divot or a crack in the road will eventually be a pothole because the moisture gets down in there, freezes, thaws, expands and contracts. And, the municipalities just can't keep up with the amount of repairs that they have to do. So, yes, that is definitely a consideration.
Yes, definitely is. Out of spec mom, question for you, Pete. It says, Pete, you mentioned your P90D battery went bad. Why is no one not talking about battery degradation? It's a real thing.
In this particular case, we had an isolation fault in the battery, which is a fairly simple repair unless the cooling system got compromised and leaked throughout all of the battery modules. If it's confined to one area, it's either a single module swap, a board repair, or just cleaning up a few cells. There are people that are definitely talking about battery degradation. In fact, it was on our podcast a few weeks ago where there was some data released where one of the universities had done a study, and off the top of my head, I can't recall quite who the university was. And chime in if you have more data.
I'm trying to think of the name of the university. What I do remember on that is that battery degradation, while it tends to be a real thing, it is not from a macro standpoint as bad as people think that it is.
Right. And it's fundamentally because when you do have a bad battery out of warranty and you're faced with a $22,000 repair, that's the situation that makes the headlines.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like when you have an airplane crash. The airplane crashes are almost always newsworthy because somebody is getting hurt or getting killed every single time. And especially newsworthy if an airplane has some sort of a crash landing and nobody gets hurt. Well, airplanes are more than 99% safer than automobiles.
Yeah.
When it comes to frequency of crashes and frequency of injuries. It's because there are so many automobile crashes that they don't always make the news.
Sure. And, for those of you interested in getting some live data from owners that are experiencing the Tesla battery failures, there's a Facebook site, and it has BMS_029 in the name. There are 900 subscribers now to that site, I think.
Yeah.
And that's where you'll see people talking about not only the type of problem they're having, but a lot of companies chiming in as to what the fix for that is and what they're able to offer in terms of services.
Yeah, and Ray Johnson, I believe, is the administrator on that group. Good guy, and that's been a very useful group to a lot of people that do have some of these battery degradation issues occur.
Sure. Let me get into one of the other items here, and then we'll continue to go into the questions and some of the comments.
We're getting very backed up, so just keep that in mind.
All right, I will do it. So one of the other features with this Highland car, you got me confused there. We've got Highlander chiming in here, and we got the car named Highland. Blind spot indicator. Now that one is probably my favorite one in this list. What this is apparently is, they say most modern vehicles on the road today come out with a blind spot indicator system. Well, not in the U.S. that I'm aware of. In Europe, yes, they're claiming that they have much more there. This handy feature triggers a visual alert. It's usually an orange or red triangle located in or near the side view mirrors when a car is approaching from behind in an adjacent lane. This warns the driver to take a better look before changing lanes or overtaking.
I like this particular feature a lot. My Volvo XC40 does have that. And as we're driving, especially if I go to turn on the turn signal to change lanes, yes, my wife is with me when that happens. If I'm turning on the turn signal to change lanes, my car will beep at me as well. But I don't even have to turn on the turn signal to see that yellow blind spot indicator light on either the driver or passenger side. Like you, this is one of my favorite features, and I think is a huge improvement.
I don't know if there's any research that has been documented how many accidents occur because of blind spot mistakes. But I would imagine it's substantial because a blind spot truly is something that gives you no indication that someone is in a lane adjacent, and as soon as you make that left or right turn, you're going to smash into that party, unless they're very astute and they're able, through side view vision, they're able to determine that there's a problem and they need to get out of the way, which of course is not always the case. Now, in this particular Highland vehicle, the blind spot indicator light is placed in the A-pillar speaker, and it is a red light that will illuminate, and it's to test the cameras that are actually seeing this for you.
Okay.
So again, we're becoming cyborgs. We have some assistance from the machines around us.
Well, I think that's good assistance in this particular case.
All right, TikTok. Sean Galt says, "What's up, guys? Thanks for joining us."
Thanks for joining us.
YouTube, PYGKLB, he says, Pete's car is now a hanger queen. Yes, it is. Highlander says, kindness is always free. Yes, we subscribe to that as well.
Absolutely.
And then we've got Niles chiming in from Denmark. He says, Pete, when you refer to rules, do you mean traffic rules or maneuvering rules? The types of rules that full self-driving is adhering to, those would be traffic rules.
And then YouTube, Roger Starkey says, Tesla could set a 0.5 second stop at a solid line, essentially a roll through but verifiable in data if questioned. Yeah, they could. If it goes down to 0, that's still a lot slower than a lot of people do.
So, Niles, I oftentimes pause because his questions are very insightful and oftentimes have extensions to them.
Yes.
And I just realized the term that he's asking about when he says maneuvering is definitely something that this new imitation FSD has taken into consideration. And that is, with a rules-based FSD, if you get into a situation where you have to break a rule in order to avoid a collision, it may not let you do that.
Right.
The car ahead of you is stopped. Your braking system is not going to be able to respond. So what do? You go out, cross the double solid yellow line to avoid that accident. This imitation FSD because it's taking information from the best drivers that are avoiding accidents at times, is actually incorporated into this FSD. So it will break the law at times for a much larger purpose.
Very, very interesting. And that's something.
Thank you, Niles, for
something I hadn't
pointing
thought
that
of.
out. Yeah. All right, Roger Starkey, I guess you got that one.
Yep.
All right. YouTube, RC Robinson-San. My full self-driving car uses the turn signal 100% of the time, sometimes 120% or more. Yeah, it sounds like rule-based stuff. When FSD gets smart enough to drive the way I do, which is when appropriate, use the turn signal, we may change that.
Yes. PYGKLB responds to that too. It says, my car too, Robinson Sen, it particularly wants to signal that it isn't going into a turn lane.
Oh, really? It sounds like dumb FSD in that case. YouTube, Bion, again, Niles says, no, all version 11s are partially neural network driven. I did not know that. Did you know that, Jess?
Yeah, it's actually not correct. They're not neural network driven at all. There are version 11s have neural networks in them, but they only use that for object detection, and then that neural network is feeding information into the rules-based system, which is then driving the car. The neural networks do not have any impact on the actual driving of the car. The rules-based system interprets that data as it sees fit. That's the fundamental difference between version 12, is that the neural network will actually be in full control of all of the aspects of driving the vehicle.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Jesse.
It looks like it's sunglasses time, according to Highlander.
That's right.
My favorite time of the day. So if you guys have some pretty fancy looking sunglasses and you don't have a pretty fancy looking sunglass case, we've got the solution for you. So this is the Gruber Motor Company sunglass case holder. We haven't gone into detail on it, but you can get your Roadsters or just your vehicle's VIN number engraved on it.
Mm-hmm.
The first 10 get Founder Series and the first 100 get Signature Series? Is that right?
I don't know. You guys make the rules.
The first 100, I think, are going to get Signature Series. I don't know about the Founder Series.
Okay, scratch the Founders. The first 100 get a Signature Series. Everybody else gets the normal series, but they're all still good. Genuine hand leather, $79.99 unless you use code Richard or Aaron, 10% off.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Will there eventually be a code CAST too? Good point, right?
I don't know. I think that Cass might blow us both out of the water.
I think hers is 50% off, but we have to charge you double for it.
By the way, we are enjoying these sunglass commercials, or these sunglass holder commercials. We're not lighting the world on fire with sales yet, but this is good practice for us when we're able to do product placement in our podcasts.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely it is.
There is one unique feature about these sunglass cases, though. These are going to be the only sunglass cases that are magnetic. So you can put them on pretty much anything that you want to. Camera can't see it, but it's stuck to the mic right now.
Okay, excellent point. Thank you. Instagram, 9K2JW, Anwar says, hi, my friend. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Instagram, Rojo Sub says, what about for use a virtual assistant as Tesla models like Siri or Alexa or Jarvis? You know, we talk about that in the AI podcast at times, that as these kinds of functions continue to evolve, eventually you will have that capability in your car. Your car will be communicating with you. And we already give it voice commands.
Right.
But it doesn't respond. It doesn't, do any therapy with you. How was your day? Why are you driving so aggressively? You probably should calm down before you get home and kick the dog and,
Yes.
But it's coming, guys. It's an exciting time to be alive.
Niles has another question or comment for us as well. He says, from what I read, it looks like full self-driving has used neural nets since 2020, but only for parts of the system. That would sounds like it would.
We answered that one. I think he said he tried to delete that or something.
Okay. And then Dojo is much faster. He continues and asks, why isn't the blind spot warning a buzzer instead?
Or both. Yeah, you're right. Because if your eyes are not focused on that particular part of the car, although I suppose that that spot that they placed it Well, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea. I know in my Volvo, if I'm trying to go over and my car will warn me, it will beep at me, it will tug on the wheel and try to pull me back into my existing lane.
Really? Okay.
So it's pretty it's pretty aggressive. I like it though. I like that.
Mm-hmm. YouTube, Herbert Booter is joining us from Düsseldorf, Germany. Welcome, Herbert. He says, "Oh God, not a buzzer. Would be on all the time in busy traffic. The warning signal my Mercedes had already 10 years ago." Yeah, good point. If you're in heavy traffic, I guess you're constantly getting buzzed.
Yes. And speaking of buzzed, Highlander says, "What would happen if you put Sandy Monroe, Pete Gruber, and myself in a room with a kegger of Guinness?"
He says, "I'm 15 years younger. I get to the, yeah, so I get the keg first, LOL." Yeah, that would be an interesting experiment. You know, the other day, Mike Maloney, who was on our podcast, we had always been joking about, you know, our beer drinking prowess. I'm Bavarian. I'm supposed to be a heavy drinker, right? And anyway, we went out that night. We each got a liter of Hefeweizen, and I had a hard time finishing it. He, on the other hand, finished it and was kind of disappointed because we said, you know, it's kind of late. We need to go. And, you know, he says, "Oh, I was going to drink another one, you know." But, yeah, it's just because you're Bavarian doesn't mean that you can put down a lot of beers. I'll tell you one more quick story about that. Years ago, we were at Munich, Oktoberfest. We're sitting at one of those wooden benches. I had the most exquisite prime rib that I've ever had. It was tender. It was. They called it ox meat, but it was, you know, it was beef. And of course, drinking a liter of Oktoberfest beer. And everybody is doing this as the a band is playing. And so we got to know some of the people at the table. And I asked them, because they had been there, you know, for some time that day. I said, "How many of these do you drink per day?" And he says, "Well, we drink about 11, and then we drink schnapps on the way home on the train at night." And I thought,
wow.
11 of those, you know? But anyway, yeah,
Wow.
I'm nowhere near that. So Highlander, you'd probably drink me under the table, it sounds like. Guinness is good stuff, by the way.
On YouTube, Out of Spec Mom, her comment, it says, "Pete and Sandy in the same room would cause our collective heads to explode."
Yeah, probably. And
Just
you know, that day may be coming because he said he was coming out here this fall. Did you guys have something?
I was gonna say, just so you know, Mark, you had us all cracking up back here when you said, speaking of buzzed.
Yes.
And then went to that
Yes.
when we were all
Pete's
holding in
another
our
term.
laps.
When was your last keg stand anyway?
My last what?
Keg stand.
Oh, keg stand. Oh man, you know, at 72, those heady days of craziness are way in my past. I can't remember really.
He does a beer bong instead now.
A beer bong. All right. Niall says, "Pete, if the 300,000 code lines they tossed to specify traffic rules, then I don't think it's a good thing from my limited AI experience." Yeah, you know, Niles, I don't know whether they retained any of those rule-based FSD or that code. But I'm certain that a lot more information is going to come out about that because most people are going to need to be convinced to buy this, you know, feeling safe. And I'm sure that Tessa's going to do a good job of presenting it in the proper light and giving full disclosure.
Yeah, I think so too. In fact, one of our commenters from a past podcast had said, you know, the best way for AI is to have both the heuristics and the rule-based code in place. And if they're going to throw out the rule-based code and go wholly to heuristics, then that might end up being a problem as well. I don't know. We'll just have to see.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. So one of the other things in this Highland vehicle, you don't just get a few speakers, you know. I mean, back in the day, I remember my buddy's 63 Chrysler 300. There was one giant speaker in the middle of the dash. And it was pretty awesome. I mean, we were playing, you know, 60s music back then, a lot of Motown type stuff, and it had great sound. And then came stereo. Now you needed two speakers.
Oh, yes.
Left and right channel, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then that wasn't enough because you had low frequencies mixed with high frequencies. So now you had a woofer and high frequency tweeters. And they figured out that with a woofer, you don't need two woofers for stereo. You need just one because low frequencies are not directional.
Yes.
but high frequencies are. So now you had 3 speakers in your car, right? And from there, it just migrated. Well, this Highland car is going to have 17 speakers in it.
Yeah. But as somebody who loves his speakers in his car,
Mhm.
I think we have 14 in our Volvo. That's the newest car that we have. I happen to love this. As far as the importance of the feature, it's not important at all, but man, it will sound nice.
Yeah. You know, I think Elon is an audiophile, or at least he sets high standards for what goes in a Tesla,
Yeah, I think he does.
which is probably the reason for that. So yeah, brace yourself, folks. These are actually designed by the Tesla sound engineers with help from Bang & Olufsen, which is a well-respected, audio, high-end audio manufacturer. So
What I seem to be finding with these cars is the audio that comes standard from the factory, and this isn't just Tesla anymore. This is a lot of mid-range and upper mid-range to high-end cars. You're going to get a better audio system from the factory than you could possibly afford to buy out in the open market.
aftermarket, yeah, aftermarket.
The aftermarket stuff is that's a dying breed.
It has to be, yeah, because the manufacturers are coming out with these types of systems. Very cool stuff.
Sure.
Facebook, Brian Onda J says, hi, welcome.
Hi.
YouTube, Edge of Time Edge says, here in Italy, nobody wants to drive electric car because they are scared of anxiety of charge, the range anxiety.
Yeah.
And, eventually Italy is going to get a lot of superchargers and charging stations. Here in the United States, it almost seemed like it was overnight. We went from the Tesla Roadster experience, where there were no chargers anywhere, right? Except KOA campgrounds, to then having destination chargers. The businesses quickly figured out there are enough EVs out there now. If you put a charging station by your restaurant, you may attract a higher end client. Because remember, these are luxury cars.
Yes.
And from there, they decided that wasn't fast enough for trips. Then we went to superchargers. And I don't know, the last count, I lose track all the time. We've got our 50,000th supercharger stall now. Here in the United States.
What I happen to look at, I think of, okay, I've had a Model S now for about 5 years, I think. And I remember taking it to California on a trip with my wife back in 2020. And there were superchargers probably about every 100 to 150 miles. We were thrilled to be able to drive an electric car to Los Angeles. For us, that's about 350 miles. I had an 85 kilowatt battery at the time, so I would stop twice on the way there and twice on the way back to charge. Gives us plenty of time. We typically would take one stop anyway, so changing that 1 to 2 wasn't a big deal. And I thought, okay, that's plenty. Well, now I think there are chargers every 40 or 50 miles, except for the interstate where you have the long distances. And what used to be 16 stations at a place like Quartzsite is now close to 100. I would dare say, at least on the Tesla network, it feels ubiquitous. It feels like they're just everywhere.
Yeah. In the last century, there were actually distances in the United States between gas stations where it was suggested to carry a 5-gallon gas can with you.
Not just in the last century. Taking a trip back home from Alaska, back here to Arizona, I picked up a pickup truck from a family member, and there are stations, even now in 2022, this was, where that you better stop, for example, at Whitehorse in the Yukon Territory, because you're not going to have fuel available to fill up your tank for 200 miles.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you don't have 200 miles of range, then you better have an extra gas can.
And Pete,
Yeah.
I just looked up the length and width of Italy because I thought that's not much bigger than a state here, right? So it's only 237 miles across. You can do that in a single charge, and then the length is 700 miles. So that would be one charge.
Okay. So
But I mean, that's very easy to accomplish.
yeah, going across, it's the boot down to Sicily.
But
That's
that with a 20-minute stop at a supercharger, you would have no trouble doing that whole thing.
Yeah. My biggest concern about Italy is what are they going to do with these magnificent supercar, sport car manufacturers like Lamborghini and Ferrari, who at this point aren't really sounding like they are committed to EVs or even comprehend what they need to do or what direction to go. And it may be because the image of those cars just is not going to be consistent with EVs.
Yeah.
You know, that Chevy Camaro that I raced the other day, my car was silent as it took off, and it beat him. The other car, there was tire squealing, there was exhaust noise. It was all music to my ears,
Sure.
but my car couldn't do any of that, you know. And I just wonder whether these over-the-top, hypercar manufacturers are going to keep a clientele based on this new version of cars that are coming out, completely silent and no longer as sporty. I mean, as much as I love Tesla, that new Tesla Roadster, that second generation, does not speak a performance car to me. It's a scaled down Model S. Sorry, guys. I'm sure that I'm going to raise some, some responses with that. But whatever happened to the angular lines in the Lamborghini Huracan or the Aventador? You know, these were real cars that spoke to you as they were coming at you on the road.
I guess the question will be, what happens when there's a generation of people who grow up never having heard those cars in the first place?
Yeah, true.
And they won't even think about it.
It'll probably sound like the rice burners sound nowadays with the coffee can mufflers, that irritating, raspy, leaf blower sound. Sorry. Yeah. We'll have to cut that out.
Those small Asian cars that they try to make them sound loud so that they sound like they're big, and they sound like motorcycles. They don't even sound like cars.
They sound like bodily noises on steroids to me. Can I say that too? We're getting politically correct here, guys. There's certain things that you can and can't say on social media. Facebook, Ross Couples. Oh, welcome, Ross.
Welcome.
He's actually one of Ray Johnson's contacts.
Yes.
Who's having a battery problem. He says, Eins, zwei, Xufa. That's right. That's what you do when you're drinking beer. And everybody raises their beer. Curious, have you ever seen a BMS _ 018 charge imbalance within the pack resolve itself with time? Ooh. I'm going to have to defer that to the technical guys over at GMC because they live there and they work on this all day long. I'm assuming that if it's something having to do with moisture or water ingress, that it may dry itself. Don't know off the top of my head. Instagram, Rana Tanzil says, what about vehicle-to-grid technology in new Tesla models? Nope, they're still not doing that. And I'm confused why.
I think that Tesla's strategy is not so much to do the vehicle-to-grid as it is to try to get people to put power walls in their houses instead.
Yeah, good point.
And so the power wall will do the grid portion, and then the vehicle has the charging. So I think they're saying that it's a duplication of effort almost.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I agree with that strategy, but I do think that's what it is.
Yeah. It'd be nice, though, to be able to capitalize on all that DC energy that's stored in the car and, couple that to the house. In an emergency, especially like like that Ford F-150 that kept the freezers running during hurricane, whatever it was in Florida.
Eventually I'm going to convince my wife to get that Lightning or get that Ram Revolution, I'm settled on one of those two, I think.
Yeah.
And eventually we'll get that. And when we do, we will make sure that we get the 80 amp charger with the back feed to the house if we need it.
YouTube, Edge of Time Edge. He says, I love Motown music. I love Motown music. I love disco. And when I see people sitting at a light these days with the windows partially down so you can hear it, and they're listening to rap, have you ever seen anybody happy that's listening to rap? They're usually pissed. They're angry. All right? This disco music and Motown music, it made you laugh. It made you smile. It made you dance. It made you talk. That's from my generation, by the way, guys.
I love the Motown music like you. It's not my absolute favorite genre, but there's such good music there, and
Yeah.
I respect and enjoy listening to a lot of genres of music. Roger Starkey says, "He who dies with the most toys or speakers wins."
Yeah, good point.
Good point, Roger.
And the most wattage. Yeah.
Yes.
YouTube, Edge of Time Edge. He says, I've been driving from South Italy to the north of Italy with my Model Y rear wheel drive without any problem. I drove the car without problem because we have in the freeway on the gas station superchargers of third. Okay, so about a third of the country has them.
Okay.
It was better than driving a fossil burning car. I put on my autopilot and it was a great drive. Well,
Yeah.
you are an ambassador and a missionary there in Italy, and we hope that more Italians catch on to that notion.
Likewise. Highlander on YouTube says, Motown. I saw the Temps and the Four Tops in concert.
Really?
Outdoors in Kettering, Ohio, next to Ray Charles. Best concert ever. He said Ray was in St. Mary's, Georgia as well. My sub was in Kings Bay at the time.
Interesting time. I agree. Now, we could get into clothes, but we're not going to do that here. You know, the bell bottoms and all
Oh,
that.
yeah. So, yeah.
YouTube, Raymond Hurt says, if car batteries are under warranty, I doubt that the OEMs would want people using their car battery for other purposes. You make a good point. There's a certain amount of wear and tear that they anticipate under a warranty risk program. And there was a besides that too, guys. If you can scroll back down, I'll get the rest of that question. He says, besides, people would probably abuse them. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, and Roger Starkey reminds us of what Elon has said about this. He says, as Elon says, a car with vehicle to home is only a house battery when it's out the house.
Mm-hmm.
When you leave the house, so does the battery.
Yeah, good point.
Okay.
Semantics. YouTube, Niall says, could Tesla's reason for no vehicle to grid be that it would drain the nickel batteries so that the cars would get a bad name?
Maybe. I see Tesla going more and more, though, to the LFP batteries. And those lithium iron phosphate batteries have very little nickel and cobalt in them.
Well, the other part of that answer is, let's not forget that the Tzero, AC propulsion Tzero in 1997 is what really started Tesla. It's what convinced Martin Eberhard that a electric sports car is viable. It convinced Elon 6 months later to invest in the company. That Tzero had vehicle to grid. It was way ahead of its time. Mm-hmm. The fact that they did not use that in the Roadster is, to me, puzzling because they initially used the Tzero or the AC propulsion drivetrain in the Roadster without vehicle to grid. So somewhere they made a decision that this is not important. And this, of course, was well before charging stations and power walls and home stationary power, any of that. But that would be an interesting thing that Isaacson could have asked Elon when he wrote the book and said, Elon, tell me about vehicle to grid. Why do you not incorporate that in any of your cars? I think he missed that question.
I think he did too. We have a couple of Instagrams here. It's Rish Han Ann and 27 says hi. Also,
Ashkar Progwada also says
thank
hi.
you. You always get the pronunciations better than me.
And of course, you Instagram guys, if you want to see the images we're putting up, we didn't put up a lot today, but there's a cool studio behind us. You would see more than just a green screen.
And if it's okay, I'd like to. Yeah. We're starting to get close on time, and I don't think we're going to get through all 10 points. There is one news article that I wanted to bring up today. Simply because the news is changing so fast that come Tuesday, this won't be terribly relevant.
Good point. Let's do it.
This is a UAW update. I'm sure that it's been, everybody here listening knows that the United Auto Workers has started a strike with Ford, GM, and Stellantis. What I've learned recently is that one of the main focuses of this strike has nothing to do with Ford, GM, and Stellantis, and both parties are saying this. The focus is Tesla. What the automakers are saying is we're trying to transition to become EV manufacturers. Mm-hmm. We need to be able to compete with Tesla, and we already see that Tesla's costs are significantly less than ours.
Labor costs.
Yeah, labor costs. Tesla's labor cost is $45 an hour right now. And for the big three, their average hourly rate for their labor costs is $66 an hour. Now, if the UAW gets their way, according to Wells Fargo, a third party who's doing the analysis of these contracts, the big three's average hourly labor rate will increase to $136 an hour, over double.
Yeah.
So the United Auto Workers is also saying that Tesla is the big picture. In that case, Sean Fain, the president of United Auto Workers, went on the record this last weekend in the Face the Nation program.
Mm-hmm.
And he believes that by securing a historic pay increase at the big three auto workers, he will then gain the momentum he needs to unionize Tesla.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Now, let's not forget, too, that Elon was actually taunting the UAW a bit last week when he said something like, we're not worried about the UAW because we pay our people more than the UAW members.
Right. And so he's saying this. In fact, I'm going to just quote Sean Fain. He says, competitive, which is what the big three are saying. We have to be competitive. We have to compete against Tesla. He says, competitive is a code word for a race to the bottom. We have to bargain a good contract, and then we're going to organize these places and bring these workers in so they get their fair share.
Boy, there's a subjective term.
So that demonstrates his commitment to the strategy. He really feels that he can drive the labor rates up at the big three by taking this hardline stance, and then by doing that, to him, the ultimate prize is less what the workers get at the big three and more what he can get from Tesla.
Now, there's an interesting irony here in that the prediction now is that if any of this flies, that it's going to kill the big auto manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if this then motivates or forces Tesla to match, then this is not going to be the case anymore.
Right. If Tesla were forced to match costs with the big three, now the big three ends up being big winners.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, the consumer ends up being big losers.
Yeah.
You know what my thought is?
What?
I bought Lucid and Rivian stock today.
You did.
Because they're cheap right now.
Uh-huh.
And I think that the EV makers are going to be the big winners. I didn't take the time to get the Tesla stock yet, but I'll probably be getting some more Tesla stock too, because I think those guys are going to be the winners in this fight.
What was Lucid at this morning?
Oh, Lucid was at $5.25 this morning.
Oh, it's gone that low, man.
It's hit a 52-week low, and Rivian is holding its own. All that has to happen is once Lucid's new Gravity SUV comes out. This is my speculation entirely, by the way.
Not investment
I'm
advice.
not an it's not investment advice. I'm not an investment professional. Once that Gravity SUV comes out, assuming that it comes out at the price that Lucid is saying, which is going to be $75,000 to $85,000, I really think they're going to have a hit on their hands. They're going to be their addressable market goes from $15 billion a year, which is the luxury sedan market, to $310 billion a year, which is the crossover SUV market.
Mm-hmm.
That's still one of the largest and fastest growing automotive markets in the marketplace today.
Amazing.
The EV adoption rate has now passed 7% nationwide. That is getting over that hump of your early adopters versus your mainstream adopters. So I think the famous S curve that you talk about when new technologies or revolutions occur, you have this crossed S curve where on the upswing of the curve is the new technology, on the downswing is the old. I think we're just about to hit that upswing. That's my speculation completely, though.
I sense another Mark Schaffner financial video in the works here.
Oh, at some point, I'm sure there will be.
YouTube, Highlander asks, did Pete get a chance to read the Popular Science hydrogen story? I did not. In the last podcast, we talked about Denmark is actually scrubbing their hydrogen project or their hydrogen development. So it's we're thinking it's like the first set of dominoes, like the NACS charging standard.
Yes. So TikTok Dirt says they better build my Tahoe first. I agree with you here. He says, I've worked in healthcare management for 14 years. They want to make over $100 an hour to make a car. Either way, consumers will lose this. I completely agree.
Well, we're going to lose in a couple of ways. We're going to have gigantic federal bailouts with a deficit spending on steroids to protect the economy, and then we're going to have the these high cost of product.
Yeah,
it's just going to be compounded. Crunch to Grace Hopper from YouTube. He says only number 13 catching up from 1 hour and 20 minutes back. Okay, well, it's out there for posterity. So yeah, any of you that want to see these podcasts in their entirety, missed a portion, they're always posted on YouTube.
And smash that thumb. We like and ask for your likes.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got eight different channels. I don't remember all of them. One I do remember that we don't promote enough is Spotify.
Spotify, yeah, right.
We while we're not live on Spotify, every one of our podcasts does make it up to the Spotify platform. Crunch to Grace Hopper again was caught up in X.
Mm-hmm.
Bion Niles says if UAW is right that worker salaries are 5% of the vehicle cost, then a 40% rise in salary means a 2% rise in car cost. It's hardly life-threatening for any company, especially those with more automation. I would agree with you, Highlander. I'm sorry, with you, Niles, except for the fact that the UAW doesn't want just 40%.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You got to think of the labor.
Yeah,
they right now some of those people are in the strike are claiming 60 hours a week, and now they're going to fight for 32. So that's going to effectively cut production in half.
Yeah, 32-hour a week working, but they want 40-hour a week pay.
Yeah, well, be grateful, Niles. You don't have that problem in Denmark. You probably have your own version of labor unions, but this UAW situation currently is really unprecedented. It's not anything like we've seen.
Yeah. A strike against all the automakers like this.
This unreasonable, yeah. At the timing is absolutely the worst.
Oh, yeah. And that's, I think that's by design as well, honestly.
Mm-hmm. All right, YouTube, a prediction, Roger Starkey. Ford will enter Chapter 11, rise from the ashes as an EV producer in Tennessee with Tesla inside.
Roger might not be too far off. If you go to Tennessee as opposed to Michigan, there are a little more business-friendly labor laws.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee is a huge area of auto manufacturing.
YouTube, Raymond Hurt. I worked at Tesla for 6 years. Okay. I'm glad I was never in the UAW. I have been retired for 3 years and am sitting on over 2,200 shares of Tesla stock. The UAW are just middlemen that want their piece of the pie.
Thank you, Raymond. That's one of the things that people don't talk about.
Yeah,
yes.
Good perspective. And, it was like Elon pointed out, if you were shrewd enough and astute enough to exercise your stock options, the early days, there are Tesla-naires, they call them. And that's part of the reasons that we don't have a lot of Roadster people left, is because most of them don't go to work anymore every day.
Yeah, they don't need to. In fact, Roger Starkey says the same thing. He says the Tesla-naires don't care.
Yeah.
Their shares keep them happy.
That's right. Good point. YouTube, Raymond Hurt. Oh, and by the way, this is not going to work out for the U.S. auto manufacturers because their shares are going in the toilet again.
Yeah.
Raymond Hurt from YouTube. If the UAW workers want equity in their company, they should be buying company stock, not begging for higher wages and getting cash bonuses. And let's go a step further. They should be buying Tesla stock. All right. Having said that.
Raymond, I do agree with you though. If they really want to be invested in the company that they're in and not be the parasite that you were talking about them being, the ones who are there to only take and take and take, that is the definition of a parasite. You're not going to add in.
Yeah, well, as we pointed out yesterday, it goes against the evolutionary process. Parasites are not wired to kill the host.
Yeah.
And that's precisely what's happening here. You
That-
kill the host, and what do you have, you know? Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll get on to another rant with that one.
Yep.
Roger Starkey says at Raymond Hurt, your shares are a very good price, and
Question
your
mark?
shares were a very good price. Me jealous? No, I'm not jealous. Really?
Instagram, Romana Rulo, Tesla factory in Brazil. Yeah, that would be a great place. We need something in South America. We've got Latin America right now, or at least Mexico, that is evolving. But yeah, I'm not sure that there's anything down in South America at this point.
I don't think there is, and there has been rumors and talk about Brazil possibly being a good place to have a gigafactory open up.
Mm-hmm. They just need to get their political alliances squared away a bit better, I think.
Yeah, the stability of the government is kind of an
A
issue.
concern, yeah.
It would be a little bit of a concern.
I mean, in Elon's shoes, I would be equally concerned, right?
yeah, yeah.
YouTube, Crunch of Grace Hopper, he says, Roger Starkey, per a 50
A year old.
year old R&, yeah, I'm going to let you read. I'm no good with acronyms.
Per a 50-year-old road and track article, stop is physically stopped. So as soon as the tires stop turning, you can go. For full self-driving, there would be no need to even wait 0.5 seconds, especially, or 2 seconds for the initial moments to dissipate. Just proceed. So that's going back to that whole rolling stop thing.
Right.
I have to agree.
I did not know there was a specification in Road and Track at one point in time.
Interesting. And then YouTube, Ramon Hurt. Sadly, he says, most of my coworkers didn't take advantage of the stock options.
It required a sense of optimism and risk aversion, and not everybody has that. I remember, I think I've said this before, at Digital, there was an upper manager that I knew that had stock options. And, you know, when you have options, the shares might be selling at $200, but you can buy your options at $5 to $10.
Yeah.
It was substantial. And even if you simply exercised them and then sold them immediately, you instantly had cash in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this particular manager, because of life circumstances, distracted or whatever, did not exercise his options, and it was sizable.
Wow. That's, it's up to them to do that. So we'll keep our eyes on what's going on with the UAW strike and how that impacts Tesla and the EV industry as a whole. Other than that, I think we're just about at time.
We're out of time. Yep. As always, we enjoy you guys joining us. Stay tuned for those 3 Chinese orphaned Roadsters, the barn find Roadsters. We'll be posting pictures and videos out on YouTube, so look at Gruber Motors. You'll be able to see the latest developments. We've only got 1 car out so far, and it's been remarkable what we're finding. Next podcast is tomorrow morning. It's a different team. Claude and Elvis would be entertaining you. They'll be talking about things like critical power, uninterruptible power, data centers, computer rooms. And then Sunday, Jesse and I are going to do some AI podcast stuff again.
Yes, all of our podcasts are 10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. We look forward to seeing you. I'll be seeing you guys this next Tuesday.
Thank you.